Some dogs don't look sick, but something still isn't right. Welcome to The Dog Who Asked for More, a podcast for dog parents navigating the messy, complicated parts of life with dogs that no one really prepares you for. Each week, you'll hear honest, grounded conversations that help you better understand your dog, feel more confident in your choices, and strengthen the relationship you're building together. I'm Em, a dog mom, retired vet tech, turned dog trainer, and canine nutritionist who works with overwhelmed dog parents who love their dogs deeply but feel stuck, burned out, or unsure what their dog actually needs. And today we're talking about the dog who needed more, not because of behavior, but because of something deeper going on inside their body. The dogs who are uncomfortable, struggling, or slowly declining in ways that are sometimes easy to miss at first. In this conversation, you'll discover three things that often become clearer when a dog is struggling physically rather than behaviorally, like how subtle changes in energy, appetite, or behavior can be early signals that something medical is actually happening, why real answers often take persistence, advocacy, and trusting your instincts, and what can begin to shift when nutrition and care start supporting the dog's body instead of fighting against it. Krista, when things first started off with Han, what did it look like on the surface?
Han has two different diagnoses. He has IBD and copper storage disease. For the inflammatory bowel disease, which was his first diagnosis back in 2020, he started vomiting bloody stomach bile about once a month, and we had no idea what was causing it. Outside of that, he was acting normal, eating, peeing and pooping normally, same energy levels. We just had this symptom that was cropping up about once a month. So that kind of started the process of us getting into the vet and trying to figure out what was going on.
A lot of people live in that in between space, kind of where you were at, where you can't really tell if something isn't right, but you also feel like in your gut that there's something wrong and you can't really explain why. How long did that stage last for you? And tell us some of the emotions that you experienced while you were in that place.
Sure. So, of course, when we saw the first time this happened, where he vomited stomach bile, it had blood in it. Of course, got him into the vet right away because I was very nervous. That's not normal. But obviously, right, we got him into the vet, but we didn't figure out right away what was going on. So the period of not knowing exactly why this was happening lasted several months as we were kind of going down an investigative path with our vet to figure out what's happening, taking different steps and slowly getting more and more in-depth procedures to figure out what was actually happening. So it was a period of, and I'm guessing because this was a few years ago, but it was probably around 4 to 5 months potentially to get it all figured out.
Were there moments during that 4 to 5 months where you doubted yourself and wondered if maybe you were overthinking it or maybe taking it too far financially?
No, I'm I don't know, maybe I'm a bit of a helicopter dog mom, but I was like, my dog vomiting up stomach bile with blood in it is not normal. There's no way it's going to be normal. So we need to figure it out, despite even if outside of that happening, and it was spaced out. So it was a little bit weird happening once every 3 to 4 weeks and acting normal outside of that. I was like, this still isn't normal. So we are investigating it and we're going to figure it out.
Tell me about some of the subtle signs that you now understand to be part of the IBD or the copper storage disease that you maybe overlooked previously, but now you go, oh, wait, something is happening here.
So it's tough with Han because he is like so stoic and he really does not show any signs of discomfort, but you have a high drive, high energy breed. That's how a lot of them are. So he's the type of dog, like as a puppy, he would be limping and still trying to play fetch. And you have to stop them. So he definitely does not show visual symptoms. So that actually makes it really tough to figure things out with him. Because when he was probably not feeling 100% and had the IBD, we were in the process of figuring it out. He was still going to agility class, running agility and doing all this stuff because as far as we knew, he's acting fine. So the vet didn't say to not do that with him. The only super minor thing I can say is that looking back on it, I think he was still doing agility and super happy to be there, but his runs were maybe slightly slower during that time period. And that's really the only super minor thing. And that was like, if you didn't know him and see his runs every single week, there's no way you would have even noticed that he was maybe running a tiny bit slower.
I am the same way with my dogs. I'm very much like helicopter mom, and I am never sure if that's because I also was a vet tech for so long and I just kind of understand that those symptoms and they hide their pain tolerance levels are so much higher than humans. Like I am the same way, like these tiny little things I notice. I would have noticed the slower run. Toby starts to get pancreatitis flare ups. I would know and I would take him in and get him tested. And every time the vet would be like, he barely tested positive for this. How do you know? Well, I know my dog. I can tell by the way he's eating something. He was drooling a little bit this morning, just various things. So once you get that diagnosis, after that, it little settles in a little bit, and you still have those moments where you're like, this is how my dog reacts to it. This is how my dog deals with it. This is how my dog tolerates the stress of the illness, right? Because they can't communicate with us the same way that we could just be like, hey, I'm not feeling well today. I'm not coming into work. They can't say, hey, I'm not feeling well, but I'm still going to play fetch anyway, with especially the high drive dogs like Han and Fitz. So tell me some of the things that you do for him to help him slow down when he's struggling.
Yes, when it was going on before we had the diagnosis and once we got his food figured out and everything like it was managed, the symptoms all went away, which is good. This would happen, of course, in the middle of the night. That's when this would happen at like 2 a.m. He would vomit and I'd hear it. Wake up and be dealing with that. I'd lower his activity slightly, but I know it probably sounds weird, but it's like we weren't going too crazy with lowering activity or changing routine because the vet specifically told us not to. I asked multiple times. I was like, should we be lowering, changing activity, anything like that? And they're like, if he seems up to doing stuff, don't stop him. Because also at this point back in 2020, he was certainly younger. And if we didn't get the right amount of exercise, then he's going to be not a terror, but he's going to have a lot more energy in the house later at night and things like that. So it's trying to balance that. But once we got the full diagnosis and we changed his food, thankfully for the IBD part of things, that one symptom we had completely went away and we were back to normal.
Tell me something about IBD and something about copper storage disease that you wish you had known sooner.
Oof. The IBD, I'm not sure if there's something I wish I had known sooner because that one, unfortunately, I know multiple people with dogs through agility class that had it, so I was aware of it. The copper storage disease, I wish that I knew it existed. I had no idea that that was even a disease that happened. I didn't know anything about it. When he got that diagnosis, I was like, what is this? I have no clue this is even a thing. Didn't know anything about it. So I wish I just had awareness that the disease existed. That's kind of part of the reason I started posting a little bit about it on my page, which is usually very trick focused because I think just having the awareness, even though I personally don't have all the answers, I'm not a vet professional, I'm a pet owner going through it. Just having that awareness is huge. So that way you just know it's something to look out for, maybe something to ask your vet, where like I had no clue, it was completely just like brand new information for me.
That's something that I really like that you do on your account because you aren't a vet and you approach it very cleanly because there's a lot of controversy on Instagram. Like, don't talk about medical problems, don't talk about training, don't talk about this, don't talk about that unless you are a registered professional. But I think talking about your experience is just as important. You're not out there saying, feed this food, get this supplement,
No.
do this medication. You're saying, we have a regimen that works for us. This is what helped us. Here are some questions that might help you when you go to the vet. That kind of stuff I think is really important, and that helps pet owners advocate for their pets. I think it's completely necessary, and I do also think that it's super helpful. But I also think that people misunderstand chronic illness in dogs just as much as they misunderstand chronic illness in humans. So, what do you think is your hardest part about answering questions when people say, oh, your dog has a chronic illness?
I think it's probably that he does have something going on, right? Because especially the copper storage disease, he has zero visual symptoms at all. So without blood work, you would have no idea anything is going on. Imagine it's probably a little bit difficult for people to understand that there is a chronic illness being managed. Because if you look at our Instagram page, he's 9.5 now. He's doing all these tricks. He's running around and doing all this cool stuff. So they're probably like, what? That dog's fine, which thankfully he is. He's doing great, but we're managing it all and tracking the blood work every 4 months and changed his food completely. So it's been a bit of a process.
Obviously, you weren't looking for the copper storage disease because you didn't know what it was. You were just trying to figure out why he was having the vomiting. And you said that it came up because of the blood work. So did it come up immediately, or did it take time for you to get that copper storage diagnosis?
So they were actually completely separate diagnoses. So back in 2020, we had the symptom of vomiting, that stomach bile with the blood in it. Through that, we got in touch with an internal medicine specialist, started out doing x-rays because we were like, is there a blockage? Did he eat something? That was all clear. Then we ended up at the internal medicine specialist. We did a full endoscopy. They scraped stomach cells, like lining from his stomach. And that's how we got the IBD diagnosis, because his stomach lining was inflamed from chicken protein. Then we did a 3-month food trial on a fish-based kibble. All IBD symptoms went away. He was great. And as far as we knew, we were good to go. 3 years later, 2023, his 7-year-old just annual vet appointment. Our vet is fantastic. She knows I'm very thorough with the dogs, that me and my husband both are. So she was like, he's 7 years old. He's not like a super, super young dog anymore. Would you like me to run just an extra in-depth blood panel just to be thorough, have no reason to suspect anything, but she knows me, so she knew I would probably say yes, spend the extra money to do that. So we did, and the liver enzymes came back high. And she was completely shocked, and I was surprised anything was going on. And that was how the whole copper storage disease cycle all started 3 years later, with completely asymptomatic, no visual symptoms. It's just really because my vet asked us to do that is the only reason we found it.
I feel like that happens a lot with copper storage disease. It is one of those ones that is a little bit farther out on the spectrum. Unfortunately, there are a lot more dogs more recently that have it. It seems to be more common. I can tell you, just thinking for this episode, I was trying to think how many people that I knew, and I think I know 7 or 8 people now that have a dog that has copper storage disease. And 2 of
Wow.
them are in the same house. I had not really ever seen it hardly ever back when I was a vet tech. And now I talk to people about it all the time. So it's very interesting to me how much more prevalent it is in the dog world. Does Han take medications for either? You don't need to say what they are, how much, or anything like that. But does he take medication to manage or to get him through bouts of flare ups?
The IBD, no, it's all been managed purely through diet. The copper storage disease, he takes a zinc supplement to help manage. Again, right, the copper storage disease has no visual symptoms that we've ever seen, but we manage it through the blood work and tracking the numbers, and he takes a zinc supplement so we can keep the liver enzymes from elevating.
You've mentioned nutrition a couple of times, so let's chat about that a little bit. How important is nutrition to either disease? Obviously, IBD, very important, but copper storage, I think that's one that people maybe don't know what it is. So if you could explain it and then explain why nutrition is important for it.
Yes, for sure. So the IBD, I think that's more well known by folks, and the diet is extremely important. In Han's case, chicken protein is what was causing the flare-ups. So we moved him over to a fish protein based kibble, and that completely resolved that situation. Copper storage disease, basically, and again, right, I'm not a vet or some internal medicine specialist, but from what I've learned the last, however, what is it now? Almost 3 years now, wow, of kind of being on this journey. Basically, some dogs have a harder time processing and getting rid of copper versus some other, like, different dogs, right? It's different for every dog. So some dogs that have a harder time getting rid of copper are ones that can be prone to this disease. It's not breed specific. Some breeds seem to be more prone, but it can happen to any dog. But basically what happens is they're eating food, treats, whatever it is, has copper in it, which is a mineral that they need in a certain amount in order to be healthy. They do need to have copper. But some dogs, for some reason, their liver is not able to then like excrete the copper, release it from the body, and it just holds it in the liver, and it can reach levels that are unhealthy and then actually begins to cause like problems with the liver, damage to the liver cells, and then the liver is not functioning at 100% anymore. So that's like a high level of what happens there. And so in the case of the copper storage disease, at that point, and in Han's case, it gets a little extra layered because we can't feed him anything with chicken, but we need to feed him an ultra low copper diet. Chicken is one of the lower proteins for copper. but we can't feed that to him. So we had to go work with our internal medicine specialist, and we did find a fresh frozen food that uses fish and eggs and has a prescription level low amount of copper. So it's only around like 2.5 milligrams per kilogram, where if you go to regular dog foods that are sold on the market, you have to meet a minimum, I want to say, of around 7.5 milligrams per kilogram. So in order to get that low, you have to get a prescription food and get a vet to sign off on it. So that's, yeah, a whole thing.
It's nearly impossible to find a kibble on the shelf or even order online that has, I believe, under that 7.5 or even 5. It's really, really difficult. I know there are
Yes.
a few brands out there that do it because they obviously specialize in diets for dogs with copper storage disease. But that was something that I learned last year. And I was just really surprised at the fact that, this is something that, people don't know. They're feeding their dogs all these high copper diets that are just completely, marketed on the shelves. But
Mhm.
if you don't know, like you said, you didn't know it existed, how would you even know that you needed to look at the copper amount in the dog food? So it's
Yes,
it's one of those things that's tricky.
it
It's
is.
really
Yes.
tricky.
And I will say one thing, obviously, not a medical professional in any way. From my research, the average range that's on shelves typically in kibbles seems to be anywhere from 14 to 22 milligrams per kilogram. Is that a bad range? I have no idea. My GSP, Carly, she's all good. I actually have tested her just to be extra safe to make sure she wasn't showing any signs of this disease. She's not. She gets a whole blend of her kibbles. Some of them are in the 15 to 22 range. Some of them are 12. Some of them that I buy are very much on the low end, and they're around 7.2 to 7.5 milligrams per kilogram. So she gets a whole variety of stuff, and I try to make sure that half of it is stuff that's on the lower side. And then some stuff I might like other ingredients in it, but it might be a little on the higher side. So do my best to balance things out, but I'm no expert. Some dogs can process things fine and other ones struggle more. So it's a learning journey.
Well, and I think that's one thing that I've learned since I became a canine nutritionist is that balance, that's one of the words that's thrown around a lot, right? Balanced bowl, balanced diet,
Yes.
balance this, balance that. But balance does not come in one feeding. It comes from feeding over time. So mixing things up and doing your best to kind of advocate for your dog's stomach and make sure that you're not giving too much of this one time or giving too much of that another time. That's okay. But Fit's supposed to get 0.55 pounds, whatever that ends up being, of liver every single day. Okay, that's
Hmm.
what he needs. But if he gets zero point 0.7 one day and zero point 0.4 another day, and then he gets zero point 0.4 another day again, it's still 0.15 by the end of the week. Like it
Yes.
balances out. It doesn't have to be perfect all the time, and I think people get lost on that a lot with feeding. Feeding is not about perfection. It's not about pretty bowls or aesthetic or making sure that we're
Yeah.
feeding a specific diet all the time. It's very much about if our dog is actually finding balance in their bowl by feeding them over time. We should be feeding intentionally with purpose and not worrying so much about what the bag says because the bag is mostly marketing.
Yes, yes. And mine are never pretty. I can say that. Whenever I do post like a picture of the dog's bowls, I'm like, this does not look like the beautiful Instagram stuff you see. I'm like, it's just dump it in, mix it up.
Mine too, and since we're on full raw now, it's just really a lot of ground up meat and chicken parts, things like that. It's so funny because Fitz, his favorite thing is when he gets chicken feet, and just to watch him think about that and figure it out, it's just been a really neat learning experience. But when you feed raw, you have to rotate proteins every month. It's something that's really important part of the raw diet. So I think every month he's looking for those chicken feet, but he doesn't get them every month. I just think it's so neat that dogs can have preferences and to understand and know what those are is part of that whole balance thing too. Because
Yes.
again, I've said this before, but feeding a dog the same thing every single day for the entirety of their life, which could be 9 years, it could be 17 years. I wouldn't want to eat the exact same thing every single day for the entirety of my life. So I feel like people who have dogs that get chronic illnesses, like their dogs just get it a little bit better in general because they have to advocate for their dog in a different way.
Yes, yeah, and I think it's Han's kind of journey with these different diseases or whatever the right word is to use for it, has forced me to learn way more than I would ever thought I was going to about just the dog food and nutrition side of things. And I feel like it's just such a newbie and have no clue what's going on, but I'm trying because the first few years of Han's life before there were any IBD or copper storage issues, he was eating I think 2 or 3 different varieties of chicken-based kibble, and that was it. We were, of course, trying to do our research to make sure it was high quality brands and the ingredients were good in what we were getting him, but he didn't have much variety in his diet. We would hydrate the kibble with water and stuff like that, but other than that, there wasn't a ton of variety, and that's just because of a lack of knowledge. We thought we were doing the best thing because we're like, chicken is lean, that's healthy for people, so it's probably great. And now I'm like, I was feeding him that one thing caused him to have now a sensitivity to it. Or if he'd had more variety, would maybe not have happened. Who knows? That's a complete guess. We could have been in the complete same situation as we are right now. But now that all this has happened, he gets his prescription stuff and a little bit of homemade food that I make for him that's I researched as like low copper foods. And then while I give him all that stuff, Carly definitely gets quite a bit of variety in different kibbles she gets. And then the both of them get fresh toppers like carrots, green beans, scrambled eggs, bananas, blueberries, all that kind of stuff very regularly now. I don't do this for Han because of the copper storage, but Carly also gets canned sardines. So it's just another way to get like a little bit of a fresher protein in there, but it's not something I have to go store in the freezer, which is nice. So there's like way more going on. My dog food pantry cabinet is probably much better stocked than my own for me and my husband.
Same. I mean, I bought an entire freezer for my dog's food. It's definitely a different level of obsession. And I will say this for anybody listening, the Feed Real Academy, which is where I got my certification, my CPCN through, they do have a smaller class. I believe it's around $149, and it is a nutrition course for pet parents. And it's not obviously all of the things that I went through to get my certification, but it is some basic knowledge that can help you learn how to feed better, learn what kind of additives that are natural additives that you can add to your
Mhm.
bowl. It helps you just understand like marketing on bags and things like that. I am excited that the pet nutrition label is changing on bags and it's going to reveal a lot of things that I think people are probably not ready for as far as what's really in dog food. So I am hopeful that one helps brands understand they're going to have to step their game up and actually use better ingredients. But two, I hope that it encourages people to understand and learn more about what they're actually feeding their dogs.
Yes. And I do want to share for folks that are more interested in the copper storage disease part of this conversation. If you flip over a bag at the store, you're not going to see a copper amount listed on almost any bag. I've never seen it. Maybe there's some brands that do it, but it's extremely rare. So if you are looking for that information, most of the time you're going to have to email that company and ask them specifically for the copper content in the food, ask them for it in milligrams per kilograms, I believe, as dry matter fed is the correct label. I've reached out to a lot and they've all been very responsive. They will usually reply within like 2 or 3 days. They'll give you that information. Sometimes you have to ask the question a couple times because they might not fully understand what you're asking them, but they do give that information. This is not a copper storage disease specialized company at all, but they offer that information up front. Is Open Farm, which is nice because it kind of saves you the step. I don't have to go email. So all their products, they do list out all of the mineral content online. So I don't know if it's on the bag, but it is online, which is nice. But again, that is not a copper storage disease specialized company. And then there's companies like Voyager that makes a kibble that is for copper storage disease. They list all that information as well. So some companies do list it all out online, which is really nice because it just saves you the email, whether they're focusing on copper storage disease or not. But most of the time, you're going to have to send that email. It's not going to be on the bag. So I just want people to know that because when we first started this journey, I was just like, oh, I'll flip over the bag and look. And there was nothing about copper or zinc. It lists that it's there. It might say copper is listed somehow in the ingredients, but it doesn't tell you the amount.
I'm hopeful that that's going to change on the new pet nutrition label because they're going to have to list percentages of things, including carbohydrates, sugars, actual percentage of meat, things like that. So hopefully, copper
Yeah.
and zinc are going to be on that list. And just for
Yes.
funsies, I brought up a list of what the internet says are low copper commercial kibble diets, and I will read them in order here. Hill's Prescription Diet, ID Liver Care, Royal Canin Veterinary Diet, Adult Hepatic, Purina Pro Plan Veterinary Diet, HP Hepatic, Nature's Logic, Royal Canin Labrador Retriever Mix, Nutro Naturals, but that one is a little bit higher. It says that one tops around 10 to 12 milligrams per kilogram. And then Voyager Dog Food is marketed with no added copper because obviously copper is something that's going to naturally occur in ingredients like meats, but a lot of brands add the copper in with the
Hmm.
palliatives and the other vitamins and things that they add in after the kibble is cooked. This conversation is so important because it's just one of those things where people don't know all this stuff. And so I highly, highly, highly recommend anybody who's interested, take a look. I'll drop a link in the episode description for the Feed Real Pet Parent class. Check it out. Like I
Hmm.
said, I think it's $149. It's a great way to get your foot in the door if you're interested. And I also offer free consultations if you just want to talk about your dog's diet or ask questions about diet. That's, a great way to do it. And veterinarians are also great, but not all of them. Like you said, you go to an internal medical specialist and that sometimes you have to find a dietitian or a nutrition person that specializes in those areas. That's why we have people who specialize in things, guys, because not everybody can know
Yes.
everything about everything.
Yes. For folks, if they're for some reason worried about copper storage disease, or maybe they did blood work and the liver enzymes came back high. As far as I know, the only way to get 100% for sure the diagnosis is copper storage disease is getting in touch with an internal medicine specialist, doing an ultrasound, and then you follow the ultrasound with a needle biopsy of the liver. So they actually have to pull liver cells out and then look at them under a microscope, and then they can actually detect that there's a certain level of copper in those liver cells.
I know that you said that you got this diagnosis done about 3 years ago now,
Yes.
but can you give me a ballpark estimate about what it cost you to get the diagnosis? Just so somebody going into this might be able to better prepare if they have kind of a baseline.
Oh gosh, this is going to be a super rough number. I did not look through that part of my paperwork. I'm going to say roughly, or probably going to look at like 1600. That's a super, super rough number because I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, right? Like we did an ultrasound. An ultrasound's around 450 in my area, but then add in the fact that we had like a couple vet appointments prior to that to kind of get on the path. And each vet appointment's probably around 200. And then I don't remember exactly the cost of the, oh my goodness, the needle biopsy, but I'd say a rough range, maybe 1600.
I'd say that's probably a good place to start. And then depending on where you're at, I think an ultrasound in my area is like 350. So if, give or take a little bit depending on where you're living. I would
Yes.
say expect about 1500 to 2500 minimum depending on what area you live in. I think that's probably a good guess.
Yeah. And in our situation, our vet basically ran the panel, saw the high liver enzymes, and just sent us straight to the internal medicine specialist. She was like, there's no point in you spending more money doing anything here, and sent us straight there. And she kind of did the same thing with the IBD, which was really, really good. We're very lucky. Our vet's really great. I have a great relationship with them and I trust them. So that saved us a little money in that way, where if you stay at the primary only and do more steps there before moving to the internal medicine specialist, that might rack up costs a little bit more.
For the person listening, if they're suspecting maybe something medical is going on with their dog, give them your best advice or something you wish you had known about advocating for your dog.
I think my best advice would be, if you think something is off, ask to run extra blood work or whatever, because depending on what you're suspecting, ask for extra blood work, ask to run urine samples, ask to run stool samples. Don't feel embarrassed about asking for that, because the worst case scenario is it comes back and it says your dog is healthy and you can feel confident and you're not worrying. So if you can afford to do it, I'd say ask for all those things. And also, I would say be proactive about doing these things. if it's possible. Obviously, we have budget limits and different things. Maybe the vet is really far from you, but if it's possible to be proactive about things, like in our case, our vet's the one that encouraged us to run the extra blood panel on Han at 7 for no reason other than just to be thorough. And thank goodness she did, because we caught this early and we've been managing it. Where if that hadn't happened and visual symptoms actually started to show a year later or something, we could be in a worse situation. So I'd say if you're able to be proactive and preventative, and don't feel embarrassed. Don't feel like I'm a crazy person because I'm asking for this extra thing to be done, but my dog looks fine.
I think that's really great advice. Somebody who worked for a vet for almost 10 years, we would rather you ask questions and give us permission to try things to make sure everything is okay than for you to not say anything. We really would rather that you ask and try to understand and make sure that you're doing everything that you possibly can, whatever your limitations are. And if that just means one extra blood test, or that means you run a stool sample again, or whatever it is, don't be afraid. That's really, really excellent advice. So before we wrap up, I'm going to pause for answering the ask. This is about a moment where behavior stops being something to fix and starts being about communication. Can you share a moment where Han's symptoms or behavior felt like an ask that you hadn't fully understood yet, and what shifted once you listened to what his body was telling you?
I know I've said for the copper storage disease, which is kind of the more complex one, he had no symptoms, which is good. Yay. IBD, right? He was throwing up, had that bloody stomach bile, but it was kind of a weird thing because it happened once a month. And in between that, he was totally fine, totally normal. Everything was good. But I think for us, it was not ignoring that or pushing it off until something got worse or it started happening once a week or other symptoms started showing. It was being like, okay, we got this one weird thing that's happening once a month. Let's be proactive, get into the vet now and deal with it rather than waiting for things to progress beyond that.
Early diagnosis is often the key to saving your dog a lot of pain, suffering, and sometimes increase the number of years that you're able to have them with you. So don't be afraid to get in there, even if you think it might feel silly, because again, your dog can't come up to you and say, my stomach hurts, like your little kid can. And it's really important to advocate for them as soon as you notice something is different. For the person listening who feels unsure, overwhelmed, or even afraid they might be missing something with their own dog, what's one thing you would like them to start paying attention to this week?
You're asking the tough questions. Thing to pay attention to. I mean, I'd say just try to pay attention to what's normal for your dog. What is normal? Like, really learn that, be the helicopter mom a little bit or dad and really learn like what is normal for my dog so that you notice when something is different or slightly off. Like, that way you pick up on it right away. Are they eating slightly less? Are they drinking less? Are they drinking more? Are they acting more sluggish? If you're super in tune to all their regular habits, their energy levels, how they eat, all those things, going to the bathroom, you can notice when the change does happen and then be proactive about it, get them into the vet right away, do whatever it is you need to do. So I think that would be my thing. Just try to take a couple days and just pay extra attention to everything that your dog is doing. So you really learn what's my dog's normal.
Such an important message there. What would you like to leave our listener with today?
I'm hoping that this conversation helps raise awareness for certainly IBD is great for people to know about, but I think people are much more aware of that as well. It happens in humans, so it's much more well known. But I think just having awareness of copper storage disease. So if from this conversation, a few more people learn about it, are aware that it's something that can happen, that's fantastic. And I think my final message for folks would be when you get to that point where your dog is middle-aged, it varies, right, depending on the size of the breed, but ask your vet to run a more in-depth blood panel. Ask them to test for liver enzymes. So that way you can just check that and have that peace of mind of hopefully knowing that that's not an issue for you and your dog.
Absolutely. So remember to get those questions into your vet. Don't be afraid to do the test, and absolutely, absolutely reach out to Krista or I if you have more in-depth questions about copper storage. Today, we talked about what it looks like when a dog needs more medically, not because they're being difficult, but because their body is struggling. We explored how subtle signs often come first, how advocacy matters, and how listening can deeply change everything about the care we offer. So be kind, spread joy, and remember, Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is believe your dog when they're quietly asking for help. Thank you for listening to The Dog Who Asked for More. Feeding your dog shouldn't feel like a daily guessing game. Most dog parents aren't confused because they don't care. They're confused because the advice is overwhelming and contradictory. Picky eating, allergies, sensitive stomachs, too many choices, and no clear direction. That's why I created a short, free quiz called Exploring Your Dog's Bowl. You can find the link in the episode description. Stop guessing and start understanding what actually supports your dog. New episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'll see you next time.